Robert Baratheon was actually loved by the small folk, despite being a complete and total disaster for Westeros, not unlike another king who was loved despite being his own, chaos disaster tornado. Hi, Viserys. And this phenomenon is kind of interesting because both of these men are the cause of intense turmoil and destruction and death in the kingdom because of their failed management, because of their lack of decision making, to be perfectly frank. And yet they're remembered fondly despite the chaos that ensued after they were gone. And when you think about it, these two had nearly similar, dare I say, identical rules in that they were both kind of just partiers. They wanted to have a good time. They wanted to make nice with everyone. And because of that, they delegated a lot of the decision makings to their underlings. And this is what ultimately makes them two pretty weak leaders, because they are never truly involved in the nitty gritty of ruling the kingdoms, because they don't really want to be bothered with it, because they would rather be feasting, or they'd be rather, hitting up the street of silk. They want other people to make these big, tough decisions, and they don't want a lot of strife. They want everyone to just get along, get over it. They don't want to make the hard decisions. Specifically, they want to maintain the status quo. The status quo, which leaves them in, places of immense privilege and everything else being somewhat stable. And that is what I think actually endears them to the small folk. It's the stability, because if we remember the only good thing that Jorah Mormont has ever said, when Daenerys asks, oh, aren't the small folk angry that their rightful king or queen or whatever has been usurped? Jorah's like, no, the small folk care that there's food on the table, that their children are fed and happy and safe. They want a long summer and a really short and easy to survive winter. They don't care about the lords playing their Game of Thrones. And so from the small folks' point of view, because these two are not interested in the personal decision making of their time, and they want to just delegate it to these managerial underlings, in the case of Otto Hightower or Jon Arryn, the realm stays relatively stable throughout their rules, and therefore the lives of the small folk stay relatively stable. We don't have all of the wars going on. We don't have huge food shortages or whatever. Everything is just kind of chill, and they're getting to survive without being subjected to the lords playing their Game of Thrones, which always leads to the small folk suffering. Now, the irony of this is it is because these two leaders are so lax that the stage is set for the wars that immediately follow their rules. The Dance of the Dragons happens because Viserys does not shore up Rhaenyra's claim despite designating her as the next heir. Robert, because he refuses to look at anything with his own eyes, fails to see how fragmented his court has become, that his children are clearly not his children, and that really a lot of the world is starting to notice. And by the world, I mean the other lords who are interested in playing their Game of Thrones. Robert refuses to get his court's shit together, and therefore everyone is in a different faction, so that when he dies, everything fractures. You have the Lannisters on one side, you have the Starks on another, you have two sets of Baratheon-led armies, and then, for shits and giggles, you have Balon Greyjoy in the north being like, ooh, I matter too. You don't, sir. But because the turmoil that follows their rules, their rules by the small folk are remembered as being relatively nice and stable and therefore good. Because the small folk don't have all of the information, they're going off of the broad strokes here. The small folk are not involved in the petty games of lords, and so they don't know how these two kind of set shit up in a bad way. They just see oh, well, when Robert was king or when Viserys was king, all was good, and now it's not, and now I'm angry at the people who are currently in charge. Imagine if you had an old befuddled president in charge for 4 years who did jack shit to make people's lives better, and then, oh no, whoops, the fascists are now in charge. Sure, things were stable, but now the crazy people are everywhere. Why? Because people like these fuckwits, they didn't get their shit in order. They didn't they weren't proactive. And that's what's, I think, kind of like the saddest thing about the small folks, like kind of false perception of these two as decent kings, is because they weren't actively being attacked, they saw that as a good thing. Versus someone like Aegon the Fifth, Aegon the Fifth, who actually like tried to make like policy changes to give the small folk better rights and therefore like a higher standard of living. Like they it's been so long and so far removed from Aegon the Fifth that at this point, just the fact that like things haven't gotten worse suddenly seems very chill. I swear, none of this is all a metaphor. It's fine. So at the end of the day, I think what George is doing with these two characters in particular is showing us that like stasis, being in stasis, things being stable doesn't necessarily mean that they are good, because they could be setting the stage for something really, really fucking bad, like the War of the Five Kings, like the Dance of the Dragons. And so as small folk, maybe we shouldn't be super complacent when things are like seemingly just calm, because a negative peace is not the same as actual peace. Anyway, don't forget to like, press all the buttons, I don't know, follow, whatever, and write in the comments anything you want me to talk about next. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope you all have a good night. Okay, bye.